Hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. We had some technical issues. Hope you had a great weekend. Today we are continuing our series on the everyday tools to transform health. We're talking about optimized meal planning part 2, which is about proteins and starches. So before I get started, I just wanted to remind you to complete your Brio bingo card. Just complete the activities on one line and then you can enter to win prizes. That is going on until Father's Day, so in June. All right. And if you are on, if you can give me a thumbs up, and of course let me know if you have a hard time hearing me or seeing me. I think we've got our technical issues figured out though. Okay, thanks for your patience. All right. So again, today we're going to be talking about how you can cook and eat healthier with proteins and starches using 3 tips to make healthy cooking more automatic, easier, and more fun. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Carin. I'm a naturopathic physician and registered acupuncturist. I grew up being a competitive athlete and eating unprocessed home-cooked meals. But in my teens and my early 20s, I was overweight. Being 35 pounds heavier than I am now, I was heavy set or big boned. Despite physical training and eating nutritious food. And on my health journey, the changes I've made to eating made the biggest impact on my weight and my health. So I wanted to continue this series on how to make healthy eating more automatic, easier to do, and more satisfying. So before I move on, I wanted to summarize part 1, what we talked about last week. So part 1, we were talking about meal planning with vegetables. So we're talking about 3 tips for that. Number 1 was prepping the veggies only once for multiple meals. So you can just grab the vegetables and cook them, just throw them in the pan. Number 2 was mix and match the different containers of vegetables that you've prepared. So you can have a variety of nutrients, colors, textures, flavors, and then change them up to suit your mood. Lastly, the third part was using visual cues in your environment. That's in your kitchen, in your fridge, things like fresh herbs being on the counter instead of inside the drawer in the fridge where you can't see them. So having those visual cues to help you, to encourage you to choose those healthy options. So environment matters a lot more than motivation. I invite you to watch the video if you haven't already, and there's some specific tips about those vegetable prep and planning that's on there. So again, today we're talking about meal planning for proteins and starches. Now the challenges and the goals are a little bit different when it comes to proteins and starches from vegetables. So vegetables generally we're wanting to eat more volume, more variety, whereas proteins and starches a little bit different. We want to eat good quality meats, for example. It might be wild-caught fish, grass-fed beef, and then we want to eat better quality carbs. So that might be what we call slow carbs or higher fiber carbohydrates. And then consistently eating healthy portions are often a challenge when it comes to proteins and starches, at least it is for me. So those might be some of the goals that we're trying to meet with meal prepping when it comes to proteins and starches that are a little bit different from vegetables. And then of course, just like with the veggie prep, we want to make the prep help us accomplish these goals, but with less cost and less waste and less time and effort with each meal. So a couple of the challenges that I've run into. Now, I don't have any special cooking training, so sometimes meeting these goals of trying to have variety in your meals and protein at each meal and healthy carbs, sometimes doing all of those things can be overwhelming. And then that's when we end up just eating a bag of chips for dinner, which we want to try to avoid. And one of the great strategies here that a lot of people have done, including myself, is cooking large batches of food and freezing single servings. And this is great for soups, chilies, stews, but it doesn't work great for a lot of other dishes. Things like stir fry, some roasted veggies, anything where you're baking, say like a chicken that has that crispy skin on there, it just doesn't do very well with the freezing and the reheating. And so we want to have some of the meals cooked fresh. So we want to find ways that we can support that. Another issue that I've run into so many times is that I've decided and I know that I want to make, for example, chicken stir fry. And so I go into the freezer and I'm looking for 2 or 3 chicken thighs. And what I find is that my package of chicken thighs, my 12-pack chicken thighs, have frozen into a gigantic frozen brick. And so all I wanted was 2 or 3, and now I have to thaw out this entire pack in order to get that. So what that means for me is that I will maybe begrudgingly unthaw the entire thing. And then now I'm thinking about, oh, I have to use the rest of this pack really quickly. Or I might just skip the chicken altogether and then I don't meet my protein in each meal goal. So this is one of the challenges that I've run into. And then lastly, meat and fish are often the most expensive parts of our groceries. So we definitely want to make sure that we're not eating more than we need and we're not wasting any parts of it. So James Clear, who's the author of the book Atomic Habits, he says, and I quote, "If you want better results, forget about goals. Focus on systems instead." So once we know our goals of trying to eat healthy proteins and eat healthy carbs in healthy portions, our next job is to design our environment to support these goals. So here are 3 tips to create systems for healthy eating and simpler cooking. And I'll say the 3 tips right away, and then I'll go into each one of those in more detail. So number 1, make it obvious. Make the healthy choice the obvious choice. Number 2, make it easy. Reduce the friction between you and the healthy option. Number 3, make it appealing. Make the process fun, satisfying, and allow room for creativity. So let me go into each one of those 3 steps. So first one, make it obvious. Our actions are often driven by what's the most obvious option. And the visual cues, like we talked about last week, are really powerful. What we see matters. And grocery stores know this because their grocery stores are strategically set up this way. In grocery stores, eye level is buy level. The higher priced, highest margin items tend to be right in our eye level. And this might be the reason why 2/3 of what we buy in a supermarket, we had no intention of buying when we stepped into the grocery store. So what we see is really a powerful driver of our actions and our decisions. But we can use this in a positive way too to actually help our health and our goals. So number 1, keep the healthy options in the most accessible spaces. So I can't really show you my freezer from this angle, but my freezer is kind of tall and high. And then when we open it, the part that's the easiest to see, the shelf that's easiest to see, is right in the middle. I have a goal of eating more fish. So I try to put the fish right on that main shelf where I can see it. It's visible as soon as I open the door. And it's very easy to get at. It's right there. If you want to eat proteins at each meal, you want to do similar type of visual cues. So that might be in your fridge, keeping peeled boiled eggs or cooked beans or cooked chicken. Things are really easy and ready to go that are in clear containers, front and center in your fridge. And I'm pointing this way because this is where my fridge is here. So keep the healthiest options, the option that you want your future self to take. Keep that in the most accessible space. Number 2, store those foods with portion in mind. This is particularly important when you're freezing foods. So if when it comes to fish, let me show you the fish that I've got here. So something like fish like this is salmon, coho. Cut the fish into individual servings before freezing. I don't know if you can see it very well here, But I bought this fish, basically the whole side fillet, is that what it's called? The whole side of the fish, all in one piece. But when we brought it home, we cut it up into servings that are individual portions for us, what's the size that suits our portion. So we cut it up before we froze it, put it into the bag. Make sure that there's enough space in between the pieces before you put it in the freezer so it doesn't freeze into a solid brick. And then that way you can just take out what you need without thawing everything out. And it's already in the portion that you wanted it, you want to be eating. All right. You can freeze starches in the same way as well. This is a bit hard to see, so I'm going to actually open this up. And this is, of course, based on what portion size your goal portion sizes are. So I've got, this is cooked quinoa. It's all ready to go, but it's frozen in this plastic container. And I've just separated it out so that I can just pop out one portion that I need. And that portion, of course, makes it so that I don't have to thaw the whole thing out. I only take out what I need, but also that it's already proportioned to how much I want to be eating, so that I don't end up accidentally just eating more. These are in half cup portions, but you can do it in whatever measurements that you want to keep to your goals. Another thing that you can do is make the pre-cooked starches like this quinoa or rice or pasta, and then keep it in the fridge. I mean, it's going to be fine for a few days like that, and it does make it really nice to be able to skip that step when you're cooking. Even just boiling water to put the pasta in can take a long time. So if you can just do that and get it done and put it in a container in the fridge, that's really handy. So one little tip that I'll add into that is in the container that you're putting the starch into in the fridge, keep a little measuring scoop in there. I have a half cup measuring spoon here. And this, of course, will help me just give me this convenience spoon to use when I'm going to actually take those starches out of the big container. But also it makes it really easy for me to be aware of my portion size. So if your goal is to just stick with 1 cup of starch per meal, then that's going to be really easy to do without having to proportion it all out in the fridge or the freezer. And then the last part, sorry, the loud noise. Last part is the non-starch bases, to prepare those. We talked about last week preparing sulfur vegetables. So those are the cruciferous, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, those kinds of things. A lot of those are really great vegetables to use as a base, almost like the starch portion, to replace the starches of your meal. So cauliflower is used a lot for this, so you can have that already prepared. I have this one uncooked, but you can cook it as well. But it's already washed and trimmed and cut into little pieces and put into the fridge. So you can replace your starches with that, or you can mix your starch, half of it cauliflower, half of it pasta, for example, and then put your pasta sauce on top, and that makes a really simple base to your menu. Okay, so that's make it obvious. Keep it in accessible space, store the foods in the portions that you want them to be in, and then prepare some non-starch bases as well for your meals. Cauliflower and a lot of greens are really great for this, cookable greens. Okay, and then the second one, so make it easy. Make sure we're reducing the friction between you and your healthy option that you want to make. There's a lot of decisions that we have to make every time we make a meal. If we can make some of those decisions ahead of time, that would be really helpful. So we talked about freezing in smaller portions and individual pieces. That's always great for this. But also actually freezing in a thin layer whenever that's possible. Let me just show you what I mean by that. Okay, it's a little bit hard to show frozen food, but this is some ground meat. But what I mean by a thin layer is you can see that I put it into the bag and then I squished it down so it's really thin. This helps to, of course, make sure that it freezes really quickly and evenly, but also it helps us to unthaw it that much quicker when we actually need it. So there's less planning and bringing out the frozen foods the night before and that sort of thing. If we have it this thin, we can also just stick it in warm water and help it thaw that way as well. When it comes to bacon, this is one that's always a little bit frustrating for some people because we buy the bacon in a big clump from the store, and then when we want to use it, it's frozen in this big clump. So, and then maybe there's about 15 pieces in there, but we only want to use 2. So this is actually pork belly, but just so you can have the same idea. I've frozen it in single layers, and sometimes I do this in pairs as well, so there's only 2 slices thick. And then once it's frozen, then I put it all together. So when I actually need it, I can just take 1 slice or 2 slices out instead of trying to thaw the entire package up. And of course, when it comes to bacon, it's something that I'm trying not to eat too much of all at once. So anything that can help me just take what I need to season the food essentially is really helpful. So if it's all frozen just in singles or doubles, that makes it way faster to use the bacon just as a seasoning in your food. All right, and of course, even if you do end up using the whole package, when they're already separated like this, because it's so thin, you could just put it on your pan, even if it's frozen, and it cooks a lot faster. No need to thaw, in fact. And then, of course, when we're talking about pieces of chicken or just like that fish that I showed you, making sure that everything is frozen separately so we can just take out the pieces that we need and that it thaws out so much faster. Also, of course, label the foods. Make it easy for us to know what it is that we're pulling out of the freezer. There's so many times where I have prepared and frozen ground pork and ground meat where I thought, oh, they look so different. I'll definitely be able to tell when it's frozen. But then just the other day I was looking at it thinking, oh, I didn't label this, and now it's frozen. It's really hard to tell what's what. So label it, make it nice and simple. One of the things that I also do is, as I was mentioning, I was putting the fish in the middle section. You might want to organize your freezer into different sections for different categories of food so that you also don't really have to think too much about where's the fish, where's the starch. You can just go straight to it. And pre-made dishes as well, of course, having a section for that. Of course, having some prepared meals in the freezer, like soups and stews, chilies, is a great idea. Again, try to freeze those in a thin layer too. So we've got, this is soup that we actually got from the store, but again, it's frozen nice and thin, so when we need to use it, we just stick that into warm water and it thaws out really quickly. So it's really easy to use. Okay, so make it easy, reduce the friction by freezing in smaller portions, freezing in really thin layer, freezing all the pieces separately so you just take out what you need, label the foods and organize the freezer to different categories, and of course to have pre-prepared meals in the freezer, which you could be homemade or that you bought. And then lastly, make it appealing, make healthy cooking appealing. It needs to be attractive, it needs to be satisfying and fun for us to repeat it consistently. So having seasonings that you like spice rubs or herbs, marinades, dressings, sauces. This could be things that you prepare ahead of time, or they could be things that you've bought. But make sure that they're around to just easily make something really delicious, and that it gives you the opportunity to be creative as well. And that usually is more fun if you can do that. So you're not eating the same flavors all the time. Also, food is social. Share photos of your meal. Maybe even right now doing a Zoom call or a Skype party with your friends and family while you're eating together. You can see what the other people are eating as well. You can swap recipes, experiment and find out what you like and dislike, but enjoy your food and share that experience. Lastly, now you don't need any special equipment for meal planning, but look for things that can make the experience more satisfying, and in a way that's going to actually support your healthy habits. So what I mean by this is, for example, buying convenient glass storage containers like this that you can see through. You can easily see what's inside. It could be for you just something like buying a sharp German chef's knife that will make it easier for cutting lots of vegetables, or using getting a beautiful bamboo cutting board to make the experience much more pleasant when you're trimming and cutting all of this food. So just invest in some objects that will heighten that experience for you, make it easier and more fun to do. And that will help to get us to take those options and do them consistently. So as a summary, the 3 tips: make the healthy option the most obvious option. What we see matters. Our actions are driven by what we see, and the most obvious option is usually the one that we'll do. So make it the obvious option. Number 2, make it easy. Make your future actions easier to do by reducing the friction between you and that healthy option. So freezing the food strategically, not just for storage, but to make it easier to use and make it easier to stick to your healthy portions. Lastly, make it appealing, make it fun, make it creative, allow that a creative process to be exercised while you're cooking as well. And then share the photos of your meals, try new seasonings and recipes, and invest in some equipment that makes it more pleasant. Remember that the best is the enemy of the good. So it's repetition, not perfection, that leads to healthy habits. So it's my hope that you can take 1 or 2 things from today to your meal planning to make healthy eating more automatic, easier to do, more fun to do, and of course celebrate the progress along the way. If this video and the content here was helpful to you and you think it would be helpful to someone else, please share the video. We want to help as many people as we can. And of course, if there are any topics or that you'd like to hear more about, or any questions that you have, please write that into the comments now, and I'll be happy to go over that and try to address as many of those as I can. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.